Shabbat Shalom. Before I start my talk about education, I can't resist mentioning Sue Lifson, who, when I saw her here, I was struck by the fact, I've been reading the newsletters from the early years, which is a lot of fun, both for what you read and what is left out. But anyhow, in the Lag BaOmer celebration in about 1964, they did a big athletic competition with all the students. And Sue Greusser won the 400-yard dash. Something I never knew. Probably you didn't either. So recently, Stephen Gogek wrote to Temple Emunah to ask about Mrs. Lena Stiglitz, his Hebrew school teacher here in the 1960s. She was a Holocaust survivor with a tattoo on her arm, and he remembers her well. Stephen went to Israel at the age of 18 and changed his name to Shlomo Aitan. His older brother, Howard, went after graduating college. Their whole family eventually relocated to Israel, including his mother, Charlotte Gogek, who was Rabbi Rosenblum's secretary and single-handedly ran the office for quite a few years. In one of his emails, Shlomo said, "Remarkably, I credit Mrs. Stiglitz with me and my entire family being here in Israel." In August 1959, the Arlington-Lexington-Bedford Jewish Community Center, the ALBJCC, hired Rabbi Herbert Rosenblum, a young rabbi just back from Israel, who stipulated that the congregation consider itself a conservative Jewish group rather than non-denominational. 2 years later, they affiliated with the United Synagogue of America and chose the name Temple Emunah. For those of you who don't know the history, the people that left the ALBJCC formed a Reform synagogue called Temple Isaiah, and they did that in June of 1959. Rabbi Rosenblum got to work immediately shaping up this diverse congregation, educating the membership, and organizing the school. I'll talk about the school in the second half of my talk. He encouraged some of the learned, Orthodox-leaning members to become actively involved in educating others in davening, leading parts of the service, and preparing the boys for their bar mitzvah. He organized a weekly evening series in adult education. In 1959, he gave 4 lectures on the 5 Megillot, and in the spring of 1960, the topic was Basic Jewish Ideas and Practices. In the fall of 1960, the opening session of the Adult Ed series was a lecture by Professor Nachum Glacier, a member of our shul. He spoke on A Modern Jew Faces Jewish History as part of a Rosenblum course titled Significant Periods in Jewish History. You could register for the series for $5, which included a copy of the textbook, The History of the Jews. Many times thereafter, Professor Glacier did the first lecture, setting a high standard for learning at Emunah. Other topics were Psalms, the heart of biblical religion, a course on comparative religion, and a course on synagogue skills led by the rabbi. Rosenblum did most of the lecturing and also started adult Hebrew classes morning and evening. Aryeh Anavi also taught many of the Hebrew classes. After the evening Hebrew class, Rosenblum held an adult study group. So you can see that there was an intense focus on education. Members seemed eager to learn Judaic ideas, religion, the Hebrew prayers, and history. In addition, the Brotherhood and Sisterhood board meetings almost always included guest lecturers at their meetings. To encourage attendance at the annual congregational meetings, they usually had an interesting speaker as well. All of this adult learning was only part of the action. social activities, harvest suppers and barn dances, square dancing, plays presented by the Emunah players, B'nai Mitzvot, etc., kept everyone busy. In 1966, Emunah joined with Isaiah to form the Lexington Institute for Jewish Studies, and together they invited distinguished scholars and rabbis to talk. And notably, this was the first real joint effort. There was a little friction for the first couple of years, and actually when Rosenblum approached Isaiah about doing a Hebrew study together in the first years, they said no, absolutely not. So but by 66, they joined. And they alternated where they met. Each lecture was followed by one of 3 classes that members could choose to attend. The fee was $7 for one person and $10 for a couple for the entire series. For example, the 1968 fall semester of LIGS was lectures by Rabbis Gittleson and Feldman, Professors Noam Chomsky and Jacob Neusner, and the courses offered were Beginning Hebrew, Prayer Book Selections, History and Interpretation, taught by Rabbi Bert Jacobson, who was helping to run the school at the time. The third choice was an introduction to post-biblical literature, taught by Rabbis Rosenblum and Bernat from Isaiah. And these joint LIJS programs are still ongoing, and definitely recommend them. They have some film series that are wonderful. They have lots of variety. They have quite a variety. Our most distinguished educational event is the Glacier Memorial Weekend. In 1980, Norman Koss convinced the board and membership to support his idea of inviting scholarly guest lecturers to teach in honor of our distinguished member, Nachum Glacier. Chaim Potak, Michael Fishbane, Elie Wiesel, Everett Fox, Benjamin Gampel, and Jack Reimer were just some of the well-known educators who spoke in the 1980s. Some of them came for a weekend, such as on Shavuot. Eventually, the Glacier Memorial Lecture evolved into inviting a distinguished scholar for the weekend, which often included giving a talk to the older students. In addition to Norman, an active committee included Harvey Lowell, Terry Swartz Russell, Sylvia Schatz, Lena Ettinger, and over the years, many, many other volunteers. Terry is always struck by the fact that most of the scholars talk about how Nachum Glacier influenced their thinking and their careers. Among the other scholars, we heard Arthur Green, Yehuda Reinhardt, Anne Lapidus Lerner, before her son became our rabbi, and another current member, Louise Treitman, former teacher in the school, Noam Sion, Neil Gilman, Jay Michelson, Jonathan Slater, Sharon Cohen Anisfeld, and so many others. The Glacier Memorial Lectures in honor of Anne and Nachum Glacier continue to this day, with the generous support of the loyal patrons and donors, and now the Friends of Glacier underwriting the fund. In 1994, Rabbi Bernard Eisenman and Gloria Greenfield and Sylvia Schatz, co-chairs of the Adult Education Committee, introduced an intensive program of learning called the House of Ascending Studies. Many more diverse educators and religious scholars visited Emunah. For example, Barbara Wissaker remembers an amazing course given in 1996 by Rabbi Meyer on the power of Jewish meditation. In one class on gazing techniques, she remembers gazing into the eyes of another student and being able to feel and see their aura. Barbara Neustadt was in the same class. Rabbi Sender's class was so popular that they extended it for 4 more sessions. Also in 1994, CJP began Meyer, a program designed to provide a framework and foundation for adult Jewish learning. CJP chose temples Emunah and Isaiah to try out this new program. Members signed up for intensive study, committing 100 hours over 2 years to study Jewish religion, culture, and civilization. Again, this very successful adult ed program continues to this day. I did Meyer a number of years ago, and I think if you didn't go to Hebrew school when you were young, this is the way to learn a lot about Jewish history. Terry Swartz-Russell remembers spending many hours at Gloria Greenfield's house with her kids and Gloria's kids, preparing the mailings that announced many of the adult education events. The children all helped with the folding and closing, labeling, and stamping of the envelopes. This was before the internet, when we needed to print out attractive flyers and mail them to the entire membership. Over 500 families now. Some of the many other adult ed members were Bob Frankel, Marcy Lidman, Lena Ettinger again, and Golda Doxer. Lena attended many of the classes, as well as signing up for Meyer, and learned a lot. When her kids were not so enthusiastic about Hebrew school, they reassured her that when they grew up, they would take Judaic courses, just like she was doing. Gloria invited her friend, Dr. Isaac Ely Stillman, to give a class on Talmud study, and this evolved into an ongoing, beloved Talmud study group, still meeting weekly by Stillman, and more than 25 years later. I'm not sure exactly how many, but you probably know, Louis. Yeah, because it was a group of women began to plan a women's Seder, and every 2 years this has been a bonding and learning opportunity with invited Judaic scholars. One year it was decided that it would be appropriate if the men helped the women by serving the food. They dressed up as waiters, and Stillman wore a tuxedo, serving with elegance. And if you're interested in the women's Seder that were done in the past, you can find them in the library, the complete text of the Haggadah. Now I'm going to switch and discuss the growth of the Hebrew school. Back to 1959. In the fall, since many families had chosen to join Temple Isaiah, there were only 35 students in the school. But by 1962, there were over 250 students. The first classes met in the fall of '59, 2 or 3 grades in one room. For the 1960-61 year, Rabbi Rosenblum and Arthur Orenberg of blessed memory compiled an extensive religious school curriculum using the Boston Bureau of Education guidelines for much of it, including the preschool. The pre-Hebrew school, including the pre-Hebrew school, which was the lower grades. Some of the teachers were Holocaust survivors, and others were students and graduate students at Brandeis University. Volunteers were enlisted to give the teacher a ride to Emunah and back to the campus on Sunday mornings. Students from our school were soon winning honors in the area-wide tests of the Hebrew education. In her pre-Hebrew class, Jeannie Aaron played the piano and taught her students Hebrew songs like Shalom Aleichem. Lena Stieglitz taught her young students the alphabet and how to read Hebrew, and they learned all the Shabbat morning prayers. This was in the first year of Hebrew. She was very strict and would bang a pointer on her desk when she was upset, but many remember her as an inspiring and excellent teacher. Michael Tracy said that he learned how to lead head of the school committee, organized a complex bus system to transport the kids from Lexington and 7 surrounding towns. It lasted only a few years. After a bus got lost in a blizzard, it was discontinued. Barbara Wissaker and David Ezekiel both remembered the long-haired hippie teacher Norm Kornfeld in the early 70s. And Barbara remembers the touchy-feely approach for the kids in junior high and high school. She remembers Doug Wissaker making fish sticks in his Hebrew class. Some of the teachers came from the Somerville Havaras Shalom, like Rabbi Bert Jacobson and Michael Brooks. And Rosenblum thought they would have more appeal to the older students. Harold Wachman, in response, withdrew his son from the school and held a private Hebrew class focused on learning prayers for his son and some of his friends. I asked Rabbi Joel Myers for his memories about the school. In the 1970s at Emunah, women began to be full participants in the worship service. He remembered when 2 classes of 9 and 10-year-olds went on a weekend school trip to Brooklyn with their teachers and some parent volunteers to experience Shabbat. When the kids returned on Sunday, he welcomed them back at Emunah. One youngster ran excitedly over to him. "Rabbi," he said, "we went to synagogue yesterday. And do you know that men and women sit separately?" "Yes," I said. Before I could say anything else, he asked, "Is that because of women's lib?" From 71 to 81, Rabbi Myers led the congregation, now housed in the beautiful new building on Piper Road with 380 to 410 students enrolled in the school. After some initial refusing, the board agreed to fund the position of educational director. 2 educational directors, Josh Elkin from 1975 to 1979, and Carolyn Keller from 1979 to 1985, along with their dedicated teachers, worked very hard setting the tone for creative learning and advanced study post-bar and bat mitzvah. One of David Ezekiel's memories from those days is that Rabbi Myers taught a weekly senior seminar for the high school seniors. In this small seminar, David felt he learned so much that he didn't know or hadn't remembered about Judaism and the Torah. Our next rabbi, Richard Meyer, made an important contribution to Temple Emunah by starting the first adult bat mitzvah class. In May 1985, 18 women graduated, and these B'nai Mitzvah classes continued under Rabbis Bernard Eisenman, David Lerner, Marcy Jacobs, Michael Fell, and Leora Kling-Perkins. Rabbi Kling-Perkins recently graduated a class that had to deal with the added difficulties of the pandemic, and it was an especially joyous service. And it makes me so happy that today we are listening to some of those graduates read Torah to us. There's not enough time to describe the religious school in detail over 60 years, nor to give credit to all the volunteers and paid staff that have played important roles in helping our children learn in a safe and positive environment. I think everybody here has played a role in that. But I want to mention a few highlights. Shelley Rossman was hired in 1992, creating a magical space for 2 to 4-year-olds to grow, the Billy Dahlwin Preschool. Lowell Bensky helped countless students and older members to prepare for their bar or bat mitzvah and to learn the Hebrew tropes for chanting Torah or Haftarah. At one of his celebrations here, I remember meeting a woman from somewhere who was now a cantor and was so grateful to Lowell for teaching her. Mike Rosenberg has been dedicated to tutoring our B'nai Mitzvot for, I think, more than 30 years. Golda Doxer campaigned successfully for synagogue members learning Hebrew, whether modern, biblical, for prayer book, for literacy, or for conversation. In a culmination of her efforts in 1997, Ivrit Lakol, Hebrew for All, was established, with beginning, intermediate, and advanced classes. And of course, this still continues as well. Many of the children of our members and some teachers have gone on to become leaders in the Jewish community, becoming rabbi, a head of school, a teacher of Judaic studies, or a volunteer like Sue Lifson. Rabbi Annie Tucker, Ken of blessed memory and Marcia's daughter, Barry Bellman, Esther Millman's son, Jesse Abelman, Danny and Melinda's son, Ari Abelman, David and Marilyn's son, and Judd Livingston, Howard and Ellie's son, all rabbis. Howard Gogek, Charlotte and Charles' son, is a scribe in Israel. Dr. Dahlia Hochman, who heads Gan Academy, Richard and Esther's daughter. Dr. Leora Russman Halprin, Bob and Wendy's daughter, is a professor and author of scholarly Judaic books. And Jeremy Pressman, Bob and Elizabeth's son, is a professor and author of many scholarly books in political science of the Middle East. Our own Tova Weinronk, Stan and Lori's daughter, Benny Summers, former synagogue educator and youth advisor, currently studying to be a rabbi at Hebrew College. Some former teachers include Margaret Mead's daughter, Mitch Album, Michelle and Noam Sion, Ariel Russell, David and Terry's daughter, and Rabbi Kling Perkins, who taught here around 2014. Please let me know if you know of other people, because I have a feeling that there are many others, including another rabbi, but I can't remember who it was. From 1987 to 1998, Serene Victor was the educational director, and she won a BJE Keter Terror Award for outstanding contributions in the field of Jewish education. From 2006 to 2011, our member Julia Mabuchi, and 2011 to 2015, Susan Cook, another member, led the school. Currently, Meyer is our Director of Congregational Learning, assisted by Tova Weinronk as Synagogue Educator and Young Family Engagement Coordinator. Their spirit and their programming, even under the unique constraints of the COVID pandemic, has been exceptional, heartfelt, and supportive. From 2015, our students have joyfully attended classes under the inspired and loving leadership of Meyer and Tova, along with Rabbis Lerner and Kling Perkins. Temple Emunah found a way to provide a Jewish home away from home for so many families, offering support and learning how to be supportive to members over the past 63 years. There's not enough time to mention all the wonderful programs and incredible volunteers who have contributed time, money, wisdom, and enthusiasm to our synagogue. I could list hundreds of those people. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote some very wise words about a central issue in Jewish thinking. The task is to humanize the sacred and to sanctify the secular. Humanize the sacred and sanctify the secular. I believe our rabbis Rosenblum, Myers, Eisenman, Fell, and now Lerner and Kling Perkins, as well as our educational directors throughout the years, have been able to do this so that we can be proud of being Jewish and able to be inclusive of a diversified congregation. When I told Shlomo Eitan that Mrs. Lena Stieglitz is buried at Westview Cemetery in Lexington, in the Jewish section, he actually was able to find a photo of the gravesite online. The world has changed, and here at Temple Emunah, we are keeping up with the changes.